All right, guys. Hey, welcome. So today we are going to talk about all things VA appraisals. So you may have been given this link by us through the company, maybe your lender partner, but we want to talk about VA appraisal misconceptions and those things. So we're just going to start it out. We've got a list of questions we're going to go through, but I wanted to start first and foremost. Those of you that do not know me, Jimmy Hobson. I am a branch manager at UMortgage out of Utah. Personally, myself, have done about 90 million in VA loans last 2.5 years. So I see a lot of it. I'm running about 50% of my business is VA. And I see the common misconceptions that exist. So I wanted to get Steve on here. For you guys that don't know Steve, in my market anyway, Steve Ward is a appraiser. I've been appraisals for almost 30 years from what he tells me. That's why I asked you, Steve, because I don't think you look old enough to have been doing appraisals since you're 30.
Yeah,
but he's been on the FHA for 15 of those years. So so he's seen it all. He's on the panel here locally, and he's done this a bunch, and he's good enough to come and share his experience with us. So a couple of things I wanted to start with, and the biggest and first thing I wanted to talk to you, Steve, is tell me the differences between VA and conventional appraisals and how those are done, because I know you do both.
So that's a really good question. We get that one a lot. The actual process for valuing a property between those two products is the same. It's the same grid section, the same comparable choices, the same adjustments. The VA has additional hoops you jump through, which they call MPRs, minimum property requirements. That's the primary difference, is just the way it's reported as far as condition goes. The actual process of determining value is the same between both.
Got it. So when we were talking earlier, we talked about how when it comes to complexity and requirements, conventional is probably the easiest appraisal to do, followed by VA and then FHA. So tell me the difference between VA and FHA appraisals. What are the things you have to do with FHA you don't have to do with VA?
So there's certain things, they mirror each other very closely in the sense that, for instance, they have to have adequate heat source. If there's cooling present, it has to work. FHA requires us to test those things. The VA does not. However, the VA still requires us to check them to make sure they're there and appear functioning. FHA will require us to look in the attic and the crawl space. VA requires us to observe, if you will, like through the crawl space access, but there's no requirement to go in the crawl space or the attic.
So just like VA lending, there's a lot of nuance to VA appraisals, it sounds like, where they give you essentially kind of an overview of direction, but it's not dialed in like FHA, correct?
It's very specific, but it's very specific to VA, what they require. And at the end of the day, it's they call it the 3 S's: safe, sanitary, and sound. And it's all designed to protect both the lender, but more importantly, the veteran, to make sure they've got a healthy, secure home that they can live in.
Perfect. All right, perfect. All right, guys. So what we're going to do here is we're going to go through a list of questions that you guys have presented, ones that we found the most pertinent. And then if we've still got time at the end, then I'll let you guys ask some more questions. So feel free, if we don't touch on something that you think is pertinent for everybody to know, because we're from all over the country here. We don't see a lot of manufactured homes here. We get a few, but not a ton, right? Where that exists all over the South, and we don't see a lot of barn-doors and things like that. So, but we can address, things like that. So, I'll kind of go down the question, Steve, and then if you've got some interjections, please stop me and let me know. So, first question, time and time again, this is my favorite. I've heard that VA and FHA are notorious for being low compared to an appraisal on a conventional loan. Is this true? And if so, why?
Yeah, I've heard that as well. Now, I don't see any evidence for that ever. I hear it a lot. I hear people say that VA can be lower, but the only way to do that would be to do, say, 3 different appraisals on the same day with 3 different appraisers with those 3 different products and see what you're going to end up with. Now, just because of the nuances of appraising, you're going to get 3 different values anyway. But there's no reason that any of them should differ if, say, if the appraisals were completed identical. because the same process is used for pulling comps, the same adjustments are made, the same market reactions are adjusted for. So there's no reason that they should differ at all across those three products.
Now, for you, obviously you're on the VA panel and FHA. If you did 10 appraisals in a month, how many are VA, how many are conventional, how many are FHA?
That always changes, but by and large, probably half of my work is VA, and the rest is split up between private work and FHA and conventional.
Got it. So clearly you can speak to the difference in appraising because you do all three, right? You obviously do USDA as well.
Yeah, and I've done them for, as you say, quite a number of years. Yeah.
Got it. All right. So the next question is, what conditions are required in a home? So one thing you mentioned to me before we got on the call is that you recommend every single person Google VA Handbook, Chapter 12, which is the minimum property requirements.
Lists all the NPRs. It's geared towards the appraiser, but it is a wealth of information for agents to look at. And for instance, there's a line in there about cosmetic items that's super important. And I see this mistake made by VA appraisers as well, where the VA does not consider a cosmetic item a repair item. It could have dings in the walls or a ton of holes from a college dartboard. That is not a repair item. It falls under the quality or condition rating of the property. But we would never call for that to be repaired. But I've seen VA appraisers call for that to be repaired, which if the agent understands this Chapter 12, they can then say, no, that's actually not a requirement.
Got it. So yeah, I've seen some crazy stuff, and then stuff makes sense to me. Like peeling paint always makes sense. That's a question I have right now that is the biggest thing for me. My understanding is, and forgive me if I'm wrong, let's say they have a shed in the back. Right? And the shed's got peeling paint. If there is no value given to the shed, do they have to cure that and fix it?
Yes, they do. But that's kind of an interesting question because when you say there's no value given, is it a shed that's just so poorly built that it should be torn down? Right? So,
yeah.
And if that's the case, that is an option. So if we came back and said the peeling paint has to be repaired, and the reason that it's there is it's not that it's specific to the home. It's anything on the property. That's fences, dog houses, anything that's got peeling paint, because the reason it's there is to protect the children, of course. They don't know the difference between the house and the doghouse. They're going to go eat paint chips off wherever they find it, right? And so it applies to everything on the property. Now, the choice on the shed is if there is no value, they do have the choice of just removing it rather than repairing it. That's sort of the difference on a shed that has no value.
Is there any way, and obviously this comes down to the VA, but is there any way to get an MPR waiver on a shed that needs peeling paint fixed?
Now, I think that's more in your wheelhouse, but the way I understand MPR waivers is the veteran can apply for that, and it has to be approved by the lender, and I believe they sign a document that also says they want this MPR waived. Is that correct?
Got it. Yeah, the veteran can ask for it and obviously decide what happens. Okay, perfect. So another good question: do VA repair? So you send back an appraisal subject to. Does the VA require you hire a licensed contractor to fix these repairs? I already know the answer, but I would imagine on a roof that's a yes, obviously.
Yeah. So the way we would address it is any major items. So it's roof, HVAC, electrical, anything that you would think would require a contractor does require a contractor. Cosmetic items, like for instance, the missing plate covers on open outlets and whatnot, or paint, fixing the peeling paint. That can fall under the purview of the homeowner themselves, or the agent, or whoever wants to do that.
For perspective, guys, every repair I've ever done has been completed by either the realtor or the borrower outside of a roof certification or something that's required, because if a roof needs to be fixed, they want a general contractor or a roofing contractor to look at that. So, yeah. But that's a great question. All right, next question. So they're asking about a particular county, Cuyahoga County, but I don't think this is applicable necessarily to that only. They want to know, how is finished attic space treated? Does it add square footage to a property?
So it can, and so we have recently been mandated to adopt ANSI standards. Now we have in my office always measured to ANSI standards anyway, but it is a guideline for how square footage is determined. Now an attic is an interesting question because it probably has sloping ceilings for the walls. So off the top of my head, it's something like 5 feet, and everybody can look this up. It's easily searchable. The wall has to be, say, 5 feet. The ceiling has to have, I think it's 7 feet. So there's certain guidelines for what can be square footage or what we can count as square footage. Now, access is another thing too. We did an appraisal. It was a VA where they had finished the attic, but the access was a ladder, and it was a nice ladder. You know, it was nice finished space. That they will not count that because the access has got to be stairs. And so you can look that up. The ANSI standards are something everybody should know anyway. The appraisers are the only one that have to follow that standard, however, which is kind of odd. It causes some mistakes, but ANSI standards will answer that question on attics. And I think that's across the country.
Where would you find the ANSI standards at?
If you just Google it, ANSI, how to measure a home or ANSI standards, it's there, and it's not very long. It's pretty clear on how homes are measured and how square footage is reported. Yeah. Backing up just for a second though, just because it's not, let's say we couldn't count it as square footage, does it have value? I think that's the question that's probably more important. And yes, it does. I could say the attic is finished. I separate line item that attic as a single line item adjustment, say, you know, we'll just make up a number, $10,000 or something. For its use, the kids can go up there and play, you know, they can store things up there and whatever. It's not square footage, but yes, it has value.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's the most important part. You and I talked about, you know, I'm doing a remodel in my house and talked about like my storage space. You know, does it have value? Yes. Do you count the square footage? Maybe, maybe not, but it does have value, and that's what matters. Okay. So the next question is kind of a hybrid for you and I both. What is the biggest misconception that you as an appraiser hear about VA appraisals?
Well, it comes back to your first question about if they come in lower than conventional refrigeration. That's probably the biggest one I hear. The other one is that they're harder to do, or they're more difficult for borrowers to go through the hoops of the VA loan process and the appraisal process. In a sense, there's like I said, there's hoops to jump through, but none of them are difficult. There's properties that will fail for obvious reasons, but if a property failed the VA inspection, it's likely going to fail FHA and conventional as well. It's got to be pretty bad. But the hoops that we have to jump through make a safer, a better, it's just a better deal all around for agents, lenders, and buyers.
Got it. Yeah, so that's perfect. So I would say for me, it's really that. I think the biggest things I get are that they come in lower and they take a lot longer. You know, in our market, you know, the VA turn times are 7 business days. So
yeah, they're quicker than appraisal. You know, now is a pretty stable market. But for instance, for the last 2 years, when appraisals were taking, you know, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, VA appraisals still took 7 days. They took precedent over every other deal because they had to be in on the 7th business day.
Yep. Yeah. So guys, for example, let's say you order an appraisal today, tomorrow, and they pick it up. Tomorrow is essentially considered day 1.
Yeah.
So, you know, holidays don't count, weekends don't count, Saturdays and Sundays, but everything else does count for that. So, all right, that's awesome. So here's a good one. This is one of my favorites. Not that I love Tidewater, but Tidewater does exist. When you as an appraiser invoke Tidewater, how can an agent and a lender best prepare documentation for you to get it in front of you for consideration? My guess is 8 times out of 10 they're going to show the same comps you've already looked at. But how can we best approach Tidewater for you, a VA appraiser?
So agents should love Tidewater. Tidewater is their No other loan product has it. For instance, if we are low on an FHA or conventional appraisal, we send it in, and then they can duke it out after that. Tidewater allows the agents to send me comparables before we finish the report and send it in. And what I encourage agents to do, it goes back to the initial, when I first show up at the home. Back in the old days, everybody got busy, and I don't want to say lazy, but everybody got busy because deals just flew through. There was a list of comparables almost always on the counter in a folder. Along with those comparables was a little why our home is great compared to other things list. The agents really put effort, had a packet for us to pick up, and away we went. This is sort of a version of that. I encourage the agents to, it's not just sending comparables in, but why is this a good comparable over, say, another one you might have in your file? Why is this a better sale? This has multiple offers, or it has something better than our home, or something better than the comparables we might use. Don't just send the comps in, send a little reasoning why these are good comps.
It's funny you say that, because I've had some appraisers say, I only want the grid with 3 and nothing else. And then I've got reasonable appraisals that'll look at everything. So I think the directive is kind of the grid setup, but most appraisers have been doing this a while, yourself included. I mean, you're looking for the ability to help a veteran buy a house. You're not going to.
The last thing we want to do on any loan product is not hit the sales price. That is no good for anybody. So we do our best to do it, but we still have to protect the lender from overlending and the buyer from overbuying. That's, at the end of the day, that's what we're supposed to do.
Got it. So they're asking about tips and tricks to submit an ROV, but that's not really your wheelhouse. An ROV is on us and them. But I would imagine the very same things that we just discussed are applicable to an ROV as well. When you get that in front of the staff appraiser at the VA, you're going to want to put your best foot forward, explain why it's better. You need a letter from the veteran. You need, if there's finishes that make it better, if there's a reason why, maybe they missed comps. I've never had an ROV where they didn't give me more value, at least a little bit. But, Steve mentioned, tell me what your stats are on ROV for you, Steve.
Well, I've never had an ROV issued to me through the VA ever in all my years, but I've had lots of ROVs on conventional and FHA, and it's the exact same thing. Don't just send comps over, send over why you think they're good. I'll quite often tell agents, we're in the neighborhood for 20 minutes, we're in the house for 20 minutes. You've worked that home, you've looked at all the comparables just like I'm going to. You're going to be an expert in that market. Send me why you think those comps are good, not just that here's some comps, good luck.
Got it. Okay, here's the best question we talked about earlier. What are the top 5 things that is common that agents are not doing that they should be doing when it comes to their veteran buyers?
All right, so this is across the board. I'm an agent as well, so I can not get picked on for saying these. The number one thing, and if I make 10 phone calls a day to agents, 1 may answer the phone. The number one thing is pick up your phone. Everybody lives in this world of cell phones, but for whatever reason, they seem to ignore them. If you don't answer your call, it might not be just me calling to schedule. I might need to know some information about that home. So pick up the phone. That's my biggest complaint with agents and trying to get appraisals done is there's no responsiveness. The other thing is accurate reporting on the MLS. We see some horrible things listed, and those are our comparables, right? They help me with the appraisal, but they help all of the agents in the future with better comparables that are out there that other appraisers are going to use on a property they may have listed. We'll see, for instance, square footage taken from county records, and then we'll look up county records, and it's not even close, and it'll be a tri-level with 500, 500, 500, because they said 50 and 100, they just divided it by 3. So accurate reporting on the MLS. This next one is for agents that do new construction. So we'll quite often see comparables that just say, that's on the MLS, but it says for comparable purposes only, but they don't list any information, just the address and sales price, and then that's it. It doesn't do us any good on trying to find comps for you on maybe the project you're working in. But the biggest is response. Pick up your phone.
One thing I noticed in our market is there will be townhomes and they'll call it a condo style townhome. And so unless you're, and so it's listed incorrectly in the MLS, and you look in there, it's like, is it a condo or a townhome? Because in the VA world, that's a different animal. Condos require project approval and they need to be, and it's totally different than, I had one that literally it was listed as a townhome all over everything, and it was condo.
Yeah.
And it killed because it wasn't approved. So.
Yeah. Yeah, we have to do some digging. Whenever we get condo or townhome appraisal orders, we always do an extra layer of, okay, what is it exactly that we're doing? Half the time they're wrong.
Yeah, got it. I got it. Okay. So, so this question, I'm not exactly all the question, but I'm asked. So VA required repairs. What they're wanting to know is why is this not consistent? Now you said you're a review appraiser. You told me that a little earlier. Why from one appraisal to the next are they're hitting us for different items? And why does the VA not do unrepaired value similar to like conventional?
So the VA does not want to do an unrepaired value. They want to know what it's worth with the repairs completed. There's no reason for them to have an unrepaired value because that's not what they're lending on. So they only want that one value. Now, as far as the consistency goes, yes, I wish there was some consistency. That's appraiser to appraiser. And without seeing, for instance, that question, whoever posted that, their specific differences that they saw, I would have a hard time answering that one. Now, like I said, Chapter 12 is very specific on what the VA is looking for. But I have seen appraisers call out things that they shouldn't be calling, and it's usually cosmetic items. It's usually fix a hole or this piece of tile is chipped, I want that replaced, which there's no need to do any of that, but I do see it.
Got it. I actually had another question pop in. This is actually important. I don't know if this is more of a U question or more of a VA RLC question, but they're asking if you're looking for a condo or at a condo, I don't think occupancy matters to you. If it's VA approved, it doesn't matter, right? But what if you're looking for condo deals and condo occupancy, if that is applicable to you? I know it is on conventional, right? Where do you get that information?
So we always ask for a condo cert. And so the lender is supposed to supply the condo cert, although they hardly ever do. We have to dig for it afterwards. But that's where that information comes from, is from the condo cert.
Got it. Okay, perfect. All right, so let's continue down. Another one about lower. Okay, this is a good question that is, I think it's applicable to all appraisals. How much month-over-month appreciation and or depreciation are you taking into account from December till now?
That's such a good question. So the way we're handling the market change in this office is, so we will look at when it went under contract, or when a home was listed, when it went under contract. And so, for instance, in about August is a good month. Things started to go a little bit sideways, and even though the interest rate is measurable, the reaction to the interest rate climbing is not. There was some panic selling. There was people that just simply did not want to sell. There was people that thought, I'm going to hold on and wait. So everything from about August to December, maybe even first 2 weeks of January, we really try not to use when we're looking at comparables. Unless they're just solid, we try to avoid using those comps at all costs. We won't go back further than August anymore. My typical search criteria right now is 30 or 60 days. I won't go further back than that. And even then, you have to really do some digging onto seller motivations, because nobody wants to give up a 2% loan to move to a 7%. It's really, you have to really peel back the layers on comparables and when to use them and when not to use them.
Have you noticed with the rates going up, I've started to see, I mean, this is not a VA question per se, but just a perspective question. I've started to see a lot more junk hitting the market. Like everyone thinks they're going to get their $300,000 house that barely will pass inspections on a conventional appraisal, and they're going to sell for $400,000. You've seen a lot more trash on the market.
I don't know that I have seen that. I've seen, no, I don't think I've seen that much. Now, remember, I'm not in the market like an agent that's looking for homes for clients.
Sure.
When that appraisal hits my desk, it's under contract. there's been a meeting of the mind, someone's decided they want to buy it. That's when I see the property. On the investment side, I used to do a lot of flipping and buying and selling that way. There's nothing for me out there right now, even if the price is right, because rates are not right. It's a really hard market to invest in right now.
Got it. That makes a ton of sense. Okay, so I've got a personal question for me why we continue to go down these. And this is what I've always wondered. If there's a purchase price on the contract, why is it the appraisal always comes in at or near a purchase price, even if it's worth way more?
Well, that's such a good question. And it comes back to that, what I just said, the meeting of the mind. So everybody should, or at least after this, they should learn what is the definition of market value. And people always say it's a willing buyer and willing seller, but there's more to that. It's knowledgeable buyer, knowledgeable seller. And inside of that is a knowledgeable agent, right? Or there should be knowledgeable agents on both sides. Put all of that together, the price that they come up with is from agents that we deem professionals in their market, right? And so it stands to reason that the contract price is going to be very similar to the appraised value because everybody's done their homework or should have done their homework. So we get that. I used to get that question a lot. Why did you come in, so close to the sales price? Well, you're a professional agent. Would you not think that it should be that way? Yeah, and unless they're giving, and we have seen, and I won't name the discount brokerage in town, but I've seen so much money left on the table, it's almost criminal for these people that don't do research or don't have knowledgeable agents on their side or in their camp.
For those of you, any in the Western markets, just look for the green billboards. You're welcome. So anyway, here we go. Okay, this is a great question that I've always wondered myself. If a house is built in 1995, why do we give a shit about peeling paint? Because technically, lead-based paint should have died in the 70s. Why do we care?
Yeah, so it has nothing to do with lead-based paint at that point. And this is for every property built after 1978. It's when there's peeling paint or missing paint, the wood that's underneath it is subject to rot, and it will rot very quickly. That takes the soundness off the table. So, for instance, this VA webcast, anything after 1978, they still want you to take care of peeling paint, regardless of whether it's lead-based or not, because the home will fall apart without proper protection.
Got it. So soundness. All right, that makes a ton of sense. Mm-hmm. I mean, I probably should have used my brain on that one, but that's okay. But I appreciate that because I know I get that question all the time. Well, it's built after 78. Why do we care?
Yeah, it falls under the
paint concern with FHA and VA, right? So
yeah, it's not. It's a soundness concern, not a lead-based paint concern.
All right. Here's a fun one. So I know one of the answers, but I'm curious. So what sort of landscape items could be an MPR concern? Number one. And they're saying one appraiser noted bushes were too close to the house and needed to be trimmed back. I think that's ridiculous as well. Why?
That one, yeah, no, that's not a VA concern unless it's damaging the home. It's not like in a wind situation, if it's hitting the soffit and peeling off or corners of shingles, that kind of thing. I could see that happening. Right. The only landscaping issue that I can think of off the top of my head is the slope, the grade from the home out. VA requires that there be a slope to allow water to drain away from the home or prevent any pooling. That's a concern with the VA.
So for me, I've noticed this, like if you're missing downspouts or they're broken or there's not the pipe at the end that routes it into the yard, if it's pulling up near the house, they're going to get flagged for it. I've had agents go and pile the dirt up and move it so it moves away from the house to get it to pass.
Yeah, so downspouts have to be diverters that have to divert the water away from the foundation.
All right, so with that said, we've talked about peeling paint, we've talked about those type of MPRs. In theory, to the best of your knowledge, what MPRs that get flagged by you can be in theory, should the SAR, the lender, be able to self-certify on, and which ones require an additional inspection?
So the SAR can, they have the ability to sign off on anything that requires a professional. For instance, any contractor, like the roofer will supply a certificate, an electrician will supply a certificate. Any of those items, the SAR can waive us going out to do the final. They can put that in the file and call it done. Now, having said that, it's the lender may want that additional layer of protection, like I want eyes on this roof, and we'll send out the appraiser to do a final, or this electrical panel, or whatever it happens to be.
Perfect. But peeling paint always requires a final inspection. Is that correct?
It does, but it does not always require a physical inspection by us. For instance, any peeling paint repairs that are after 1978, I don't have to actually go back out to that home. They can send me photos of that. Yeah, anything prior to 1978 requires me to go look at it.
To physically go look at it. Okay, well, that's good to know, because every time I've ever had peeling paint in my career, they've always wanted someone to go a final inspection, but now I know where that sits. So that's
now
good.
That's a VA rule. Now the lender still might require eyes on it for their own protection.
Sure, but at least we can argue it.
Yeah, exactly.
At least we can argue it. Okay, so all right, another good one. So, and this was just brought up last week at the LGY conference. You know, a bunch of our people on here went to that. What exactly constitutes a tripping hazard, and do we need to be concerned about cracks in the driveway?
That's a really good question, and that answer is a little bit gray, because I don't remember reading anything about tripping hazards in chapter 12 anywhere. Having said that, if there's a tripping hazard that's great enough, I may call for it, but I'd have to see it. I'd have to be standing and looking at it going.
But that would be soundness and safety, obviously, if it was that severe, you know. Okay, here's one that I just thought about. If there's a house with 2 stairs coming off the back door and 3 stairs coming off the back door, which requires a handrail and which doesn't?
So the rule of thumb is 3 steps. However, I always defer to county code. And so county code wins every single time. So I would never, like, if it's 2 steps, no, that's clearly you don't need one. 3 steps, you may, if the tread height is let's say it's a goofy step and it's got 10-inch tread height, you're suddenly over 3 feet. It may require a handrail regardless. But I would defer to county code on that.
Gotcha. So what you're saying is there's a lot more work in doing an appraisal than just looking at the grid and numbers. You got to look at the county stuff too. So in Utah, in a lot of our stuff, when you guys are appraising a house, you're looking on a water heater for earthquake straps, correct?
We do. So I note if it has double strapping. I don't require it. There's no requirement for double strapping. Now, having said that, new construction would require it. That's current. If there was a water heater replacement, I show up and it's got a brand new water heater, that would require double strapping because you've changed the water.
Because I've seen it flagged and not flagged, and I've seen pictures, and I always wonder why. So if it's an existing home, but it's got a brand new water heater, typically it needs to be brought up to code, which is what you're describing with the straps, correct? Yeah. Okay, awesome. Okay, here's my favorite, because this is one of the things that I don't think there's any value in personally, at least in Utah. Do you give any value to solar?
So,
what does that look like?
Yeah, so the VA rule on that is clear. If it's leased, no, there's no value given to anything that's leased, especially if that lease can somehow encumber the title, which sometimes they do. So you got to be careful with anything that's leased that may encumber the title. If it's outright owned, then yes, there's some value there. There's not a lot of value in solar currently in Utah. We can give it some, especially if we've got comps, but the comps don't show that solar is bringing any real money in this market.
I think on all the houses I've ever had with solar, I've only seen value given once. Because it was owned and paid for, and I think it had a few comparables. I think they got 8 or 10 grand, maybe. It was like a $60,000 solar system. So. Yeah.
And there's a national average. I think we used to use, I think it was 6%. And you got to remember that's a coast to coast average. In other words, California obviously will have a higher rate than 6%, but Spokane and Seattle would have, 0. And so 6% was an average. it didn't really pan out for Utah at all. So we just look at them individually.
Got it. Got it. Yeah, we don't. I mean, it's starting to get more popular, but you know, power, relatively speaking, to most of America is cheaper here than most places.
Yeah.
You know. So, all right. All right. Here's another one. This is a great question. So, from your perspective, you go into a house, and what do you see the biggest concern is, biggest MPR you run into? What is the most overlooked common issue found during the process? What are people missing the most?
Man, the biggest one we see are in unfinished basements because they just don't go down there, are open electrical boxes. They'll run wire, but there's no switches yet for them. You know, that's a $2 fix on a $150 final inspection that should be taken care of. On refinances, of course, the homeowner may not know that, but the agents on purchases should. They should be like, we got to take care of this, especially after they've read Chapter 12. But that, if I were to pick the biggest one, second is flaking paint.
Okay.
Yeah.
So flaking paint, so exposed wiring, obviously. That goes to another question we got from the current group of people. They said, besides the electrical concerns, the exposed wires, what other concerns do we have with finished basements? I mean, obviously, there's not a lot of value in an unfinished basement other than just blanket square footage, but what other concerns are there?
With unfinished basements?
Yeah, unfinished basements, yeah.
I can't think of a concern on an unfinished basement other than exposed wiring. You know, there's specific items that we have to look at. There's some pump issues. There's, you know, it's easier to look at the foundation on an unfinished basement to look for cracks or settling. But I can't think of a specific condition that may be in an unfinished basement.
How much of a crack or settling requires you to call it out and them getting an engineering cert from like a foundation, a foundation engineer or somebody similar?
So the VA is actually fairly specific on that question, and it's anything over a hairline crack is how they word it. So, you know, especially after the earthquake, we had a lot of this in Magna area and all the way down into Kearns, where there was significant settlement and cracks from that. So we had to call out every one of those. But hairline cracks, no. If I look at a crack and I can say that thing's settled, if it's, you know, it's a 50-year-old home and that settled year one of when it was constructed, I probably wouldn't call it out if I don't see any water leakage or anything like that. But anything bigger than a hairline is supposed to be called out. Gotcha.
Perfect. So they asked about outbuildings. We know that those are included. We talked about if there's value there. We talked about paint. Someone asked about rodent-proof skirting on a manufactured home. I don't know if you've dealt with that because we don't get a lot of that here, but have you heard of that?
Rodent-proof skirting, no, there's nothing in the MPRs about that. However, it has to be on a permanent foundation. There's some specific rules for VA and manufactured homes, but I don't think the word rodent-proof is there anywhere.
Got it. Now, they're asking what can be done if no placard can be found in the home. I can answer that question. Obviously, that's ibts.org. You got a BIN number, you can usually get what you need from that. The VA, every loan type will require that. The VA is the only loan that will allow you to buy a manufactured home that's been moved from one place to another and put on a foundation. Nobody else does. So there you go, guys. That's why VA is better. Remember that. So, all right. So here's another good question. If you look at two houses side by side, let's say the one house just got remodeled and they've got higher end appliances and finishes and soft and and crown molding and stuff. How much value is there in the higher end finishes, mechanicals, and materials on the outside of a house? So let's say my house right now, it was stucco, but I've recently upgraded to Hardy, repainted it. What do upgraded finishes allow for upgraded value?
Well, there's a lot of latitude there with how we treat that. The best resource, of course, is how good are the MLS photos and the MLS description, because that's the only way we can see it. We can't go into that comparable. But if the agent did a good job on descripting the home and supplying photos, then there can be a huge difference. You have to remember, some people will say, home has a new furnace. Well, the subject has a furnace. It's not like you're comparing no furnace to new furnace. It's the furnace works in this home. This one's new. Is the value that much greater? It might be, but it might not be. Central versus evap's a big one. When they've upgraded the furnace, hopefully they've added new central. Kitchens, baths, of course, everybody knows that. Floor covering. Exterior is a good one for curb appeal, especially in the current market, because you have to be the nicest one on the block. You don't have to actually be the nicest one on the block anymore, but you should be nicer than your comparable, right? On the sales side of things.
Got it. Got it. So yeah, so obviously a nicer house in theory is going to have more value, because that's when you go back to your initial conversation about putting comps on the desk and why your house is better than the neighbor's houses.
Exactly. Now, as we talked about earlier, cost does not equal value. However, whatever you spent on your Hardy, your new siding, stay in your home.
You're telling me it's not worth that much more? Come on.
Yeah. So cost versus value especially on kitchens or any of the big ticket items, you don't get the money back out of them ever. Well, I shouldn't say ever, but not in the short term.
Yeah, I mean, if you're putting a $100,000 kitchen into a house to sell it, you're probably not getting $100,000 back out anywhere near that. So okay. We talked about solar, obviously. What about new windows? Is there value in new windows?
Yeah, so especially on the older homes, and it's obvious, single pane versus double or triple pane. But it has to be a significant difference from old shaky aluminum to newer wood or vinyl windows. You can't just upgrade your already double pane to just newer double pane and expect a huge difference.
Got it. Okay. Good question for you, because you're in the middle of this. Compared to, well, we already talked about August to December of last year, right? So we'll take that out. Year to date, are you seeing more Tidewater? Are you seeing people still delusional about 60 grand over list? Are you seeing Tidewater more often?
It's funny. We did a multiple offer appraisal just the other day that was higher than, even one of the offers was the old we'll pay 10 over appraised value. Those are still popping up here and there. Tidewater shows up. I don't think it shows up more right now, but it shows up for different reasons. So back in the increasing market, we just didn't have the current data. It was hard to justify some of those increases with comparables that are always historic in nature. I think our last Tidewater was probably an issue of, I think they were overpriced on that one. We're seeing still a little bit of that.
Got it. Everyone's wishing they'd sold a year ago instead of today. Yeah,
exactly. Well, and they're just hoping that there's still a buyer out there that's desperate for a home, I think. And
understood. So we've talked about Tidewater. We've talked about how to best present Tidewater back to you with comps and different things like that. So I think we're good there. Basically they're asking to go over the Tidewater process. For you guys that have not dealt with Tidewater, essentially, if Steve can't hit value, he invokes Tidewater. You have 48 hours, and then if on a Friday, you basically get till Tuesday, essentially. But you get 48 hours to come back with comps before he makes a determination. The appraiser will not tell you what their value is. What they're asking for you to present comps to justify the value you have the house listed for and you're selling it for. Because, sometimes they're not able to come up with the data for you. And so keep that in mind, that it's not their job to give you a value and then tell you how to get the value. Right? It's your job to present it. They hope that, back to the whole idea that you're professionals, right? That we've got the correct data in place. Have you ever heard of a Shouse? A 3-car garage shop with a house over the top. You ever heard of that? Have you seen one?
Yeah, so we just did one the other day. They're not common. In the rural areas, a lot of people would build those as they were going to build their other home and then use the upstairs apartment as a rental. The one that we did, they did that and then they built the home next to it, but they wanted the square footage from that apartment included. And that's where it fell apart, is you can't then add that into the square footage of the house, even though it's an apartment.
What if that's all it is that Shouse? They don't have another building. Then you've just got to look for comparables. At that point, it's just a regular house, is it not?
No, in fact, I can only think of one that was purpose built that way that I've ever done. That's not a very common
So
structure here.
whoever asked the question, if you're on here and that exists more in your market, I would talk to the local appraisers and see. Your lender can get you the name of a couple good appraisers because we know who they are off the VA appraisals. I will give a caveat that outside of trying to adjust value, because that's never a good thing, obviously. But the VA appraiser is the one appraiser you can technically have a conversation with and ask, say, well, what do you think about this? Like maybe they invoke Tidewater. So I'll call Steve and say, hey, I know Tidewater's here. Are we going to get hit for any repairs? And because the VA appraiser normally will tell you that up front so you can solve that, which is amazing. You're not going to get that answer. And some appraisers will go so far as accusing you of trying to steer them to a value by calling them. So that's important to consider when you're dealing with, again, a VA appraiser. And because, they are given the designation by the VA to obviously protect the veteran, number one, but also make sure that, if it's achievable to get the value, they want to do it for you. So, all right, we got some more questions that came through while we're on here. Looks like we're making good time, guys. So if you have some extra questions, don't hesitate to ask. I had one of the people on ask, they said, an appraisal came in low. They reached out to the appraiser and then the appraiser lowered the value even more.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Is that even legal? Can they adjust the value downward after having a conversation?
You can. I mean, there's nothing stopping us from doing that. I don't know why he would, but I can't imagine what that conversation was to have that happen. But if was it a VA appraisal that came in low?
I'm assuming such, since we're on here, they didn't mention that. I'm assuming that that's the case. I mean,
so let's assume that it was a VA appraisal. So they should not have reached out to that appraiser anyway. It should be the other way around. The appraiser would reach out to them and say, hey, we're not hitting your contract price, supply comps. Yeah. Them calling the appraiser, that's a little bit backwards, but.
Yeah, no, understood. Okay, so another question about if the veterans are still allowed to pay for termite and well water tests. Well, the veteran's always been able to pay for a well water test, but even the VA has come out and said the veteran can pay for termite as well. In Utah contracts, traditionally the seller pays for it, but at the end of the day, $100 is $100. No one's going to let a deal dial over $100. I'll pay for termite every single time to not kill it, right? Brian asked the question we answered earlier about what percentage you did as VA. You're about 50% VA right now?
Right now, yeah.
That's good. We answered the condo question. All right, here's a good one. Are there any way to dispute the required repairs when they're only cosmetic? So my understanding would be if they're required by the appraiser, they're more than cosmetic, right?
Well, no, that comes back to earlier. I've seen appraisers condition for cosmetic repairs. Now, I don't know what cosmetic repairs they're talking about. For instance, I could see a scenario where there was, say, a piece of broken tile in a bathroom or kitchen. Now, that's a cosmetic repair. However, the sharp edge is a safety concern as well. I have seen that. So,
got it.
Without knowing those specifics, I can't say, but the VA specifically says that the appraiser is not to recommend repairs of cosmetic items as a sort of as a save the appraiser's butt thing. Like they'll say, I want newer paint or new whatever, The VA just does not allow that, but I see appraisers still do it.
Got it. Yeah, it makes a ton of sense. I mean, anything safety required, if the VA appraiser sees it, they're going to flag it.
Yeah.
Their job is to protect people from, harm and damage. And I mean, again, sound safety, habitability, all those things come into play. So
yeah. Now, if the person who posted that question wants to supply anything specific, even that's tough to answer. I'd love to hear what those conditions were.
Okay, I'll watch for that. Okay, so you're in Salt Lake, but obviously I'm assuming you get to more of the rural areas like Tooele, Grantsville in our market, correct?
Yeah, so I'm VA for Utah County, Salt Lake County, Weber County, Davis County, Summit, and Wasatch.
Got it. Okay, so what is different about rural properties outside of finding comps? I mean, tell us about acreage. What comes into play if you've got big acreage?
So with everything else, we try to do like for like. Tooele is a good example where sometimes it's hard. There's 5-acre parcels, 10-acre parcels, but we try to find like for like. And the best way to describe this is if I don't have an exact duplicate, I get the next best. And then if I don't have that, I get the next best. And you can go on down the line until you've got 3 comparables, however horrible they might be, they're still the 3 best. And rural property is a good example for that. Or manufactured homes are a tough one, because there could be one sale in the entire county, and you just have to use the best of the worst.
What's the minimum amount of comps you can use on an appraisal? Is it 3?
3, yeah.
Okay. Normally you've got 5 or 6, but 3 is the minimum, correct?
No, 3 is the required amount across the board.
Okay.
Now we always, and I can't think of the last appraisal I did that only had 3 comps in it. And the way I look at it, especially on these tougher ones, is it's like using statistics to prove a point. The larger the sample, the less error you have. So I've had appraisals where I've had 12 comparables in there, because the more comps you have in there, the narrower the range of mistakes are. And so I'll put in a ton of comps to try to get the best result I can. But 3 is the minimum, but we almost always have 4 or 5 in there.
Okay, perfect. So back to rural again. My understanding, the VA does not have a acreage limitation if you can find comparables for it. However, what point so if you're appraising a property and it's got a ton of acreage, how much of the value has to be in the house for it to be able to be appraised correctly?
I don't think there's a ratio there. So there's a 30% land to value ratio guideline, but that falls apart in rural, when you've got acreage. The VA does not have an acreage limitation. However, there becomes a point where there's so much acreage, it becomes a farm or a hobby farm, and they do have limitations on lending on farms or hobby farms. They will lend on them if there's a structure that's 100% residential, if I remember correctly. So there's that, but there's no limitation on the acreage. Would just be hard to find comps for.
Got it. We don't deal with a lot of that here, obviously, but Texas, the Carolinas, Kentucky, Tennessee, you see a lot more stuff. I've got friends in all those states doing these loans. So
yeah.
All right. Someone asked about the value of a whole home generator, like a gas or electric generator outside the house. Is that got any value to it?
Depends on how it's attached, because that could be considered personal property more than part of the home. If it's, it would have to be built in a way that would be very difficult to move it, rather than just pick it up and take it to your next home. We'd have to look at those specifically, yeah.
Had someone ask about them changing manufactured homes to go before 1977. I doubt that's the case, because that's when HUD started doing that. But I doubt it changes, correct?
No, I don't think so, no.
Okay. What values? So let's say you've got a 3-bedroom, 1 bath. On average, how much does an additional bedroom and full bath add? I guess that's correct?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, because it comes down to the market and the comparables. So if you're in a market where it's predominantly 2 and 3 bedroom homes with 1 bath, you'll find comparables for that, and that proves your value without having to guess on what a bedroom or a bathroom is worth. Now, if we're in an area where it's always 2 bedrooms, or say 4 bedrooms, 2 baths, and the subject is a 1 bath, 2 bedroom, now we've got an issue where we have to start figuring out what those bedrooms and baths are worth. And we use what we call paired sales. If you can try to find a sale that's identical, that has the extra bath, and one that has not, we determine what that bath is worth that way. It's a bunch of hoops to jump through for us appraisers, but that's really the only way to figure it out.
Gotcha. Back to that lowering of the sales price, lowering of the appraised value was a conventional appraisal.
Oh, conventional. Well, I was hoping not to find out what format it was, but what the conditions were, the reason for the lowering of the value. I can't imagine what information they would say to lower the value.
Yeah, that doesn't make a lot of sense.
It could be, hey, did you know that this foundation is sinking? I don't know.
It's funny. I actually had a borrower reach out to the appraisal that came along, because he figured out who it was, and he called, swore at him, and cussed him out. And the appraiser's like, "Look, I'm going to kill this deal right now if you don't fix it." And the borrower was like, "Buckle up, you're going to get yours," threatened him. I'm like, "What are you doing?" It's an appraisal, right? In-ground pools, obviously in our market, they're not super predominant. Again, it's going to come down to comps, but let's say you spend $100,000 on an in-ground pool, right? What kind of value does a pool have? In California is going to be much more, Arizona much more, but in Utah, what do you see on that?
Yeah. So, and that's a tough one without seeing it, but as a guess, 100,000 doesn't get you much of a pool anymore, but
Yeah.
You might get on an appraisal, depending on finishes around the pool, 30,000, 25,000, 35,000, depending on if there's patio areas included, spa included. I'd have to see the pool, but about a third of the cost you might recoup.
Got it. Okay, that's better than a lot of things. So yeah.
It's
all
pools are
right.
an interesting item,
Yeah. So in order for something to be a bedroom, does it require having a bathroom on the same level?
No.
Okay. All right. So there's that answer. One of my guys in Idaho asked the question. He's heard, is it true that conventional appraisals will not call out any issues? He's had realtors state that's why they take conventional offers. I know that not to be the case because I've seen a conventional appraisal make sure that there were big holes in the ceiling and stuff, and they called it out. It's like a level of appraisal, correct?
Yeah. So a big misconception with conventional is that because they use the word as is, it means that they don't have to do anything to it, but that's not the case. So if we go out to do a conventional appraisal and it still has safety issues such as open electrical or trip hazard or no railings, we call those out as well. The conventional home still has to be safe and secure for the buyer and the lender.
Got it. Okay, unique properties. How far can you go out in your search for unique properties? Let's say you have a barn dough or something rural or the Shouts or whatever. How far can you go out in your hunt for a comparable?
So we can go wherever we need to for comparables. I did a home it was north of Logan. I think it was around 5 million. Well, there wasn't a comp. There's not a comp north of Ogden for that house. I had to go into Park City. You wouldn't go into Park City proper, but some of the outlying areas, Camas and Oakley and whatnot. So you can go wherever you need to find a comparable.
Got it. Okay, so cosmetics, it was a countertop that had some wear and tear. So I don't think that would be an issue. You talked about safety, like broken tile or something, but they should not have been flagged on wear and tear on a countertop.
No.
That should just been maybe for the condition of the house, but not for a required.
Yeah, we adjust for it in the condition. We don't condition for it to be repaired.
All right. This is a great question. If you haven't had recent enough comps in the city, would you likely to go further back in time or further out in distance?
So I'd rather go out in distance to similar competing markets than try to mess with time adjustments right now. They're just not, it wasn't a stable increase or a stable decrease. It was just havoc. So I'd much rather go out to a competing market than go back in time.
Amazing. Okay. All right. So if you put 6 comps or 12 comps on an appraisal, does one way outweigh more than the other one?
So there's a process called a weighted average. You're not allowed to average. You can't average comps to come up with a value, but you can clearly see a trend in the comps that you use, and that's a weighted average. Or at the bottom of the report, you'll see tabulated gross and net adjustments, and those are how many adjustments you've made. Are they large adjustments? And the lower the gross and nets, the similar that home is to the subject. And so it's a combination of grosses and nets.
So normally your first comps are going to be the better comps, so you're saying, correct?
You try to put the best in the first 3. That's what everybody sees. Yeah.
That was their question. We're almost to an hour. You got a few more minutes?
I've got all day if you want. It's fun.
Well, we don't want to do it all day because we value your time. But someone asked about finished space. You guys will get a recording of this that'll come back out to you. But outside of exposed wiring, you're good. I have a question about that. Suppose you go into a house and they pull the carpet up and you've got just exposed subfloor. What's required?
Is this in the basement still or any above grade?
The main level. I walk into the house and I have
the main level
in my family room and I pull the floor.
Yeah, you cannot have exposed subflooring of any kind.
Yep. Okay. Someone asked if there's value in having like a fast charger for their Tesla or similar car. I would say no, because it's going to go.
Not. Yeah, probably not. I might. We're allowed to list features and you can maybe lump things together and get an adjustment out of it, but individually, no.
Got it. Someone asked about in-ground or above ground. Obviously, above ground pool is not going to typically have value. In-ground, yes.
So again, there is a caveat to that, though. So above ground pools, you can give value to if there's fixed filtration systems and decking.
There you go.
Yeah.
All right. So then it
So
becomes like a
it,
pool.
it used to be that nobody would give value for an above ground pool for whatever reason. It just became the norm. But you can give value if it has to be typical for the market. But if it's got filtration and decking, yes, you can give value to it.
Got it. Got it. All right. Time for a couple more and then we're going to be good. So there's a parcel with 2 properties, a duplex and a single family residence. That's kind of wild. So basically it's 3 properties. Would the comps be ran individually or would you have to find a property that's alike?
So I heard 2 parcels and
No, it says a single parcel with 2 properties on it.
parcels.
So basically duplex family residence on the same property.
So I like to call that an underwriting issue. So that becomes so there's 2 ways to approach that. If the duplex or whichever of the 2 properties is the greater or the nicer, we'll say, we could do a duplex appraisal with a guest house, or we could do it as a triplex if they're all income producing. We've done that as well, but that becomes really specific to what the underwriter and the lender will accept as far as appraisal formats.
Got it. Got it. All right. A couple more and then we're good. So the basement has a toilet in it, not enclosed in a separate room, and it does have a laundry area with a sink. Can it count as a half bath?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it we would count it. We would say it's there and give it some value. Yes.
Yep. Perfect. So someone wants to know if there's a transcript of the meeting. Yes, there is. There'll be a recording. Someone asked Steve, they want to know if you're still in a band.
Yeah. Yes.
I like it. And then, of course, we've talked about unfinished basements multiple times. This is a great one. This is the one that my mom's been a realtor for 40 years, so for perspective. Does a bedroom, this is the final question, bedroom require a closet?
So that's a good question. So let me put you back in time to turn of the century, these homes in the avenues built in 1810, 1820. Did they have closets or did they use wardrobes for storage?
Yeah,
and
exactly.
probably
Good
wardrobes.
point.
But today they're all bedrooms with no closets. So depending on where it is and what it is and its use, yes, we could call it a bedroom.
So if it was built in the last 20 years, it's not a bedroom.
Well, if it's in the last 20 years, then it becomes a functional issue. So could I call it a bedroom? I could. Would I? Probably not. I'd probably call it a den or something. Could you use it as a bedroom? Yes. So, but I did want to, just one other thing with bedrooms in basements, because this is fairly new to the VA, is security bars. And so FHA's had this rule a long time, but VA now is, so if you've got security bars on your window, they have to have quick release mechanisms on at least one window in the bedroom. One window can be securely shut, but the other one's got to have some way to get out. And that's something.
That's a code issue, correct?
No, that's a VA NPR requirement. Yeah.
Yeah. So basically, you need egress. You need to be able to get the hell out of the basement.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Amazing. Amazing. Well, guys, one of my guys, Brian, is in Kentucky. He wanted to tell you thank you. He's a big VA guy as well. We really appreciate you answering the questions. It's been very informative. I'm going to go back and watch it because there's a lot of nuance to the VA. I know I appreciate your time. I've had you on a bunch of my appraisals, and the nice thing is even with Tidewater, we had one, not with Tidewater, but with repairs. You guys are very quick to get out and deal with repairs because you don't want it to take any longer than it has to. But we appreciate you very much coming on today and giving us your knowledge. You've been doing this way longer than most of us have been doing loans or real estate. So
you're welcome. If I can leave you with one thing, it would be, and I don't know what the ratio is for listeners, if it's lenders or agents, but to the agents specifically, I'd love it if we went back to the old days of when we showed up at the home, there was your version of comparables on the counter for us to look at and take home. It goes a long way to helping us figure out where you're coming from with your values.
I'm going to actually post that in my real estate group today. Simply because it's funny is, my business partner and I own a bunch of properties together, and he always does that when he's looking for an appraisal. But I've had agents tell me, well, they don't want us to do that. I'm thinking to myself, I guarantee the appraisal will take whatever you can give them, if it makes sense. I will say this, my mom had a reverse mortgage. I was trying to get one on her house, and she gave the appraiser comparables, and the appraiser asked her questions, and then he backed out of the appraisal claiming the appraisal independence requirements that she violated it after he asked her questions because she was an agent. I'm like, dude, but that's dumb.
Yeah.
But it is.
Yeah. And in fact, a lot of the newer agents that came into this business, after the AMCs started and all of that carry on, where they think they can't talk to appraisers. Well, you can. Any agent can pick up the phone and call me at any time on any property. You just cannot discuss things that may lead to any fraud interpretations. You're trying to direct me in one way or the other. But you can definitely call and ask me questions. And I call agents all the time and ask them questions. So feel free to pick up the phone.
That's great advice. So basically, no fraud, no steering, no trying to push the value, but an appraiser is always open, because here's the thing, like he mentioned, you guys know more about this property than he does.
Mm-hmm. You're the expert in, especially with that home. You've been showing it, you've been talking to people, you've been getting feedback, and so your input is invaluable to us trying to figure what it's worth.
I love it. I love it. Thank you, Steve. We appreciate you more than you know. This has been very informative. This is going to be, we had a ton of people register that missed it, but everyone's going to get a copy of this. And if we can ever do anything to help you, obviously, if I find some great off-market property that even with rates where they're at makes sense, I'll call you. So,
yeah. Or send it to me.
There you go. There you go.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Jimmy.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.